course, you all know him already, but I'd just like to say that he's someone I've worked with over the years since I've been in our movement in Britain. And I never forget when I sort of first joined, he took me for a walk in Hyde Park. And it was sort of a walk to get to know me, but we were also witnessing to people as we went on our way. But ever since that time, he's always been someone, whether I've been working with him officially within the organisation or since he's finished being the national leader, he's always been someone I can go to for advice, and someone I think, because he lives a very genuine, authentic life of faith himself, he's able to give a lot of very sound and profound guidance. So I hope you get some of that now. And I just, with that, want to invite you all to welcome him. Let's welcome Tim Reid.
Okay. Should be working. Should be working. Is it working? I mean the video. Okay.
Let's just see.
Do double screen so I can see what's up there. Don't need this interview.
You don't want it?
No.
Okay. Maybe it's better to use it. It doesn't look like you can do them both. Oh. Yeah.
Okay.
So then at least you can.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so very nice to see you again, everyone. Yeah, it's really great actually to be able to give this kind of talk because I had to sit down and work out what is Foundation Day, you know? What does it really mean, or why is there such a big thing about it? And it's interesting to see William's perspective and understanding. I always enjoy his talks because he has the historic perspective. But I'm trying to link it up with today, how we are, how I am, and that we can understand a bit more about Father also, and also to Mother. So if we think about everything, then we can understand that Father and Mother, well, especially Father to start with, had to restore the whole foundation that was lost after the Second World War. We understand that. And if you restore something, you need to restore it backwards. Yeah? If you're building a building, you start forwards, from the foundations upwards. But if you're restoring something, actually you go the other way around. You take the wallpaper off and you sort of go backwards, don't you? And so Father had to restore the Christian foundation. He had to restore Jesus' life, means Mary, John the Baptist, and so on. He had to restore the nation of Israel, temple, kings, Moses, the Ark of the Tabernacle, the time in the wilderness. He had to restore Abraham's offering, original offering, second offering with Isaac. He had to restore Jacob and Esau. He had to restore Noah and all the things that happened to Noah back to Adam and Eve, right? To create a new beginning for humans, which should be the time before the fall. We're trying to undo the fall and all the results of the fall, all the way through history. So, of course, some sections of that period took longer than others because of failures, as William has kind of hinted. And also some things are still unfolding. They still need to be unfolded. And we can see that because of this restoration, then Father's course is really, really complicated. It's super complicated. So This is just some part of it, okay? I mean, don't panic and don't try and write it down, okay, for sure. But we can see that there was like a 7-year course where Father should have been accepted, and he's mentioned this. There's Father's own 21-year course. He stated it started in 1947. And then there's also a True Parents 21-year course from 1960. There's Father's own personal 40-year course. There's the 40 plus 3 years course of the HSA UWC to restore the foundation for the bride of Christianity. There's True Mother's 40-year course from the blessing to 2000, actually June the 14th, 1999. And there's True Children's 40-year course, first started May 16th, 1981 with Yejanim's blessing, and then again actually from 2000. And then there's this 12-year course that we're in now. And actually there's many other things. If you really look to see some of the things that Father said and you really catch them, you can, with that mind, you can realize it's actually even more complicated than this, right? But this is, I think, enough for us, for the moment. And, you know, the point is that Father's trying to restore the parallel providential periods from the Christian era through back Old Testament times and before, back to the fall and before the fall, to create a circumstance where God can feel he can reside with people who are as pure as they were before the fall. So that's a big job, right? It's a very big job to do. And also Father needed to do it in a very short period of time. It's like really condensed effort. Yeah? But let's just look at just a couple of things, just because I want to use those as a sort of as something to understand how we can be also, right? So let's just look at the restoration of HSA UWC, especially because we just got an email yesterday saying that we've changed our name back again. So, you know, might as well understand that, I suppose, really. So, you know, HSA UWC was basically to recreate the foundation that Christianity needed to have to receive the Messiah. Why? Because Christianity stood in the position of the bride, right? You can read that in the Bible. And essentially, Jesus needed to marry. We understand that from Father's teachings. And Christianity was to provide this basis upon which a bride could be offered to Father or to the Messiah when he came. Yeah? Essentially, the spirit of a true woman should be embodied within Christianity, if you like. So, you know, if you think about the true Christian spirit, what should it really be? I mean, give me some examples of what you think a good Christian attitude would be, thinking about the idea of a bride. What do you think? Tell me. Caring, okay? Yeah.
Love your enemy.
Love your enemy, yes. Yeah. Compassion? Yeah. Maybe, you know, stopping the children fighting. I don't know what you call that. Heart of reconciliation.
Dolores.
Sorry?
Dolores.
Yes? Yeah. And, you know, there are many things that the Christian spirit needs to embody, yeah? And that should have been there to really provide a basis for Father's bride, yeah? To really find a woman who could really have those highest characteristics, who could really embody that and become the wife of the Messiah. But because Christianity couldn't really understand, you know, Father and what Father's mission was, we know that after, you know, 7 years, or actually less really, of effort, Father really then had to start a new kind of course. And finally, in 1954, he established the HSA UWC. And that had a mission to restore this position of the bride. And so our members and Father himself and also Mother, during that period, they went through incredible difficulties, the same difficulties that many of the Christian martyrs and people went through in the early days of Christianity and later on also. And you can see like an incredible heart of suffering and effort. I don't know if anyone's read Tiger Park's book. Has anyone read that one? It's just amazing, actually. I mean, I suggest you try and get hold of it somehow. It's such an incredible story, actually. Tiger Park was, he went and he ran carp in America for a long time. He died of cancer later. But his story is just unbelievable, actually. Really amazing. So, you know, an incredible spirit of offering, basically. And HSA UWC was officially disbanded, in a sense. Father explained that, you know, it had finished its role on the 10th of April, 1997. So that was actually 43 years kind of course. And then the Family Federation had been started just the year before that, in July, I think July the 1st or something. And basically that then took over the role, in a sense, of HSA UWC to carry on its mission in a kind of a broader sense. But we can see that in that time, Father really worked very strongly, and particularly he made a foundation in Korea until 1970, December. So 54 to 70 was like 16 years. And then he went to the United States, and he worked in America basically for 33 years to try and rebuild like the Christian spirit. He felt America had an incredible role to play in the world, yeah, in terms of its Christian role in the world. And especially he worked with ministers, particularly. Of course, he went to prison, he went to Danbury. But during that time, it was a kind of a revival for our ministerial work. And at that time, and not long after, because of that, then many ministers went to Korea to study our movement. And we could get quite a strong foundation with Christian ministers. And finally, just 1992, April the 10th, Women's Federation was founded as a sort of a platform for True Mother to go from just being, well, not just, but just from being Father's bride and the mother of his children and maybe advisor to sisters around and so on, to really taking on the role that Father had himself on a wider and wider and wider scale, so that she could really understand his heart, I think, more in terms of the broader aspects of his work with other people. And also she could actually provide a different type of input for people to really catch who Father was and what Father was trying to teach. So she started then with small tours around Korea and then Japan, then Korea, Japan and America, and then on and on and on and on, basically for 7 years. And I remember when she came here on her last world tour through 80-plus different cities around the world over 4 months or whatever it was. She came into Britain in 1999 in May, I think it was May the 16th. And I remember her going through the front door in Chislehurst, and she whispered to Wonju McDevitt, her main sort of her secretary. She said, Wonju, what country are we in? I thought, well, that's amazing. I mean, it's true, I could understand that, Like if I just, in this last summer I went to, where did I go? I went to Spain and Finland and then Germany. And, over a period of about, 3 or 4 weeks. And that was kind of enough for me, And I can't imagine doing 82 cities in many continents and many countries, one after the other. Literally every couple of days it was like that, So Mother actually went through an incredible course to be able to inherit the sort of standard that Father had and try to sort of, I'm sure it was a big test for her to really control herself and to, be able to still give out and still to do hundake and smile to people and, somehow be there for people as a mother on a wider level than she was ever before. And so her course basically finished on June the 14th, 1999. So it was a 7-year period through which she went through incredible things to sort of catch up with Father onto the world scale. And then Father, for the first time, he recognized her. And he said, I want to give you, he gave her a prize and congratulated her, basically. And said that now she's standing really on a level with me in the things that we're doing. So that was a very key thing, actually. And the whole point was to restore this position of the bride, yeah? So if we look at another kind of aspect of that time or that period of time, we can see that there was a series of blessings. A series of points where Father had to create this elder son, younger son restoration position. And to start with, he couldn't even establish himself as a true father. He had to sort of, in the very early days of the church, he prayed in Jesus' name, in Christ's name. Later on, the prayers changed, and gradually, I think our members used to call him Master to start with, very early days, when he was more like a teacher, and then later he became Father, like that, and then true Father. And so somehow, step by step, Father was trying to establish this elder son, younger son relationship, not just with members, as it were, but with the Cain figure on wider and wider levels. The first kind of major victory that Father talked about was August 31st, 1989, was where he explained that he'd been through these sort of 8 stages of this Cain-Abel relationship on wider and wider levels, not just with one person or a group of people or his tribe or, people representing Korea, but actually people on the world stage even. And we know that just not long after that, then he met Mr. Gorbachev, he met Kim Il-sung, and he could really sort of make some condition of unity with this type of world level, sort of Cain type of person. And then in August the 9th, 1997, which is the time after Mother succeeded on her world tour, and instead of just being like an elder son, he could start to really work on the idea of parentship. And he started to work together with Mother. And he said now God has actually got he's reached some sort of Sabbath period where we've been restoring all these Cain-Abel relationships. We're trying to make the foundation of faith and substance, which I'll talk about in a minute. But now we can actually stand as parents to people. And he started to emphasize much more about parentship and true parents. And then later, the 3rd stage was when he had this coronation ceremony for the kingship of God on January the 13th, 2001, where he started talking much more about sovereignty and establishing a nation and so on. So again, there's this kind of step-by-step process that Father went through to try and build a deeper and deeper foundation of the heart. So if you look at this kind of period, it was all to do with how to love your enemy, how to win someone's heart, and also how to be more and more parental. And, True Mother had to be super parental on a world level, And then even how to really establish some basis of sovereignty so that we can start to think about, worldwide constitution or how should a nation start to be established and so on. So all that was done in that period of time. So, True Parents' mission was to restore our position before the fall, as I explained. So what was the fall? So the fall was, first of all, it was Adam and Eve, wasn't it? It was the Archangel and Eve. That was the first step of the fall. And that was between a spiritual being, and physically, yeah? So between a spiritual person only and a person in the physical world. Then the next stage of the fall was between Adam and Eve, which was, 2 beings on earth. And then later, of course, Jesus came to restore that failure, but he didn't even manage to even begin to restore it in the sense of, getting married and restoring the relationship between men and women. And then far later, Father then had to restore these things himself. Yeah. So he also had to go through these kinds of circumstances that Jesus went through. So he had to, go through what Jesus went through and what Jesus experienced, and then even to go back to Adam's family. So that's one reason why Father set up these different kinds of blessings. So the first blessing, of course, was True Parents' blessing. But true parents weren't really true parents, if you think about it, from what I've just been saying. They were in a kind of John the Baptist position, restoring Jesus' position, something like that, yeah? So we can say that, this first blessing here, on the 16th day of the 3rd month of 1960 by the lunar calendar, was restoring Jesus' inability to get blessed and get married. And then Father had to work to rebuild the Christian foundation on that basis. So then there were 3 couples, 36 couples, 72 couples, and so on. And all of these couples were offerings of people who were following true parents and who could really expand Father's teaching, expand Father's culture of heart, traditions and standards on a wider and wider level. And each time these blessings were successful, then Father could actually expand kind of the level of our work or the level of the providential mission that he was involved in. First in Korea, then in Japan, then Korea, Japan, and America, and then finally in 1975, with 1,800 couples blessing, he could then expand worldwide to 120 nations, and on and on and on like that. And each one of these blessings was like an offering of people, yeah? So just like at the time of, the Hebrews making their offerings and their sacrifices, and the Israelites in Israel, they would make an offering at the temple or, to atone their sins. In the same way, Father wanted to make offerings of people, real living offerings of ourselves, to be able to advance the providence by saying, well, look, here are these people, and they're following me, they're following you, they're following the principles. So basically, Satan can't really accuse us to really expand onto that level of work, because we have that level already foundation. Then 1992, 1995 and 1997 were a bit beyond our reality. But we had to do them in some sense because Father needed to make some basis on the world level. And so we get these kind of very impossible blessings. I don't know if any of you were involved in those, but I remember standing outside Wembley Football Ground, for example, trying to bless people, which was interesting, to say the least. So anyway, there were these kind of conditional offerings as well at the end of all that. And, basically, and then on the basis of, true mother fulfilling her role, true father having really overcome these Cain-Abel relationships, in the end, then after the year 2000, Father could start this 12-year course in 2001. And 6th of February 2003, he could have another blessing with Mother. And this was like the next stage back. So we started with Jesus, now we're going to go right back to the fall. And what was the fall? It was actually, if you look at it in reverse, it's Adam and Eve, right? And then the final step, which was the first step of the fall, was the archangel and Eve, yeah? So again, Father and Mother, they had the blessing. And remember, it was a very simple affair. Father had a white tuxedo, Mother had a white dress. There's nothing on the stage, nothing at all. And Father gave Mother a ring, they exchanged rings, and Father then prayed, basically. So again, there was another blessing, of course, which would represent this kind of restoration of Adam and Eve. So Mother had got onto her world level foundation, and she could get this blessing with Father. And then once again now, 2013, this year, 22nd of February, solar calendar, there'll be another blessing. And Father's in the spirit world, whether by accident or not, I don't know, really. But anyway, he's using that for this kind of purpose, to establish really true parents substantially and to undo completely the fall of the archangel and Eve. If you're wondering where I got this from, actually it's from a speech that Hyunjin gave just last week. It's quite interesting speech. It's rather explicit, actually. But I do recommend it for you. It's quite interesting. Yeah. So that's a kind of blessing providence. And so if you think about it, our blessings have always been kind of offerings until now. Because we've been in a period of restoration, and we've had to be sort of been given, in a sense, as an offering, so that Satan can step back and God can really advance the providence more deeply. So we can see that, true parents are trying to restore our position before the fall, essentially. And we look at all these historic figures, that William's, some of them I'm sure William mentioned. There's, the key central families of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, David, Zachariah, of course, at the time of Mary and Jesus. And, finally leading up to true parents, like a whole course of restoration of all these people going through many, many things to really change their hearts, essentially. So if we think about the way the fall is being restored, it's to do with restoration of heart, yeah? It's not an intellectual thing. Of course, we need to understand what we're doing, because sometimes the circumstances are so difficult we can't really see what's going on, right? So we do need to understand, but at the same time also, it's to do with our hearts, right? So if you think about, our hearts as they were maybe not long after the fall, we were quite messed up and, very selfish. If you think about, very old, pre-Old Testament people, they were very barbaric and they didn't care about anything apart from maybe their own particular family or something like that. And they certainly didn't, worry about the environment or save the whales, or anything like that. But bit by bit, our hearts have become more and more sensitive towards each other, to such a point where, we're really concerned about all kinds of situations. And we're very sensitive to people suffering around the world, and we want to do something about it. And that's because we've been growing up, over all these thousands and thousands of years. Yeah? And, basically, Father wants to be able to pass on to us a state where we can't be invaded by Satan any longer, because our hearts have come to such a point that, we don't have a connection with Satan, basically. And then there's no basis for Satan to sort of step into our lives, right? It's very difficult because we're surrounded by a really terrible environment around us. But we need to get to that point. So through the blessing, basically, Father's trying to capture us and pay a price for us through which Satan cannot violate us, providing we keep to some very basic rules, right? If we break those rules, as is always our responsibility, but if we break those rules, then of course Satan will invade us, yeah? But if we don't, then Satan cannot invade us, yeah? And if he did, then actually God would actually claim a bigger price from that. So if we look in Revelations 14, it talks about us, actually, at that time. It says in Revelations 14, they sang a new song before the throne and before the 4 living creatures and the elders. No one could learn the song except the 144,000 who had been redeemed from the earth, right? So 144,000 is to do with you, right? It's to do with us.
What are the 4 living creatures?
Don't worry about that. I don't know, and it's not particularly relevant to this. So these are those who did not defile themselves with women, for they kept themselves pure. They follow the Lamb wherever he goes. They were purchased from among men and offered as the first fruits to God and the Lamb, right? So these are the first people who could follow Christ at the second coming, and who were offered, as the first fruits, and could really stand as kind of the standard, if you like, or the first steps towards this new kingdom. Yeah. So the whole history then has been this kind of amazing kind of journey, if you like, of God trying to establish his foothold. Well, not just simply his foothold, but he's been trying to establish his heart. Even his seed in human beings, because God wants to be inside us. God wants to be with us. We are an expression of God's nature. And, we are part of God in some very deep way. So God wants to be part of us and wants to work through us. And it's taken this long. And if you look at, you can look in world scriptures, in Chansangyon and a few other places, and Father will say the fall occurred 800,000 years ago, nearly 1 million years ago, 1.2 million years ago, Father said. A few times, different things. But anyway, around about 1 million years ago. And that's a jolly long time, right, since the fall. And you can imagine, what went on in that period of time. How were people really during that time? And God had to work with people and try and deepen their hearts and raise them up, step by step by step, generation by generation, millennium after millennium, patiently teaching, guiding, and then gradually people could start to change until we got to a point now where finally Father can come and be blessed with Mother and can kind of pay a huge price for us so that we can be sort of snatched away from the fallen world and we can have a new start and a new beginning, right? And not just a new beginning in a sense, but a way in which we can start on a completely pure footing if we follow the things that Father's been teaching and if we can really push ourselves to overcome Satan in our circumstances and Satan within us. So this is a very special point, that we're at, where we can actually be taken away from the fallen world, and we can make a new start. And it's to do with this holy wine and the covenant. Now, William mentioned the covenant, that Solomon broke the covenant that God had made with him. And if we look at the blessing, which is water and wine, is forgiveness, which is water, and a covenant, which is represented by wine, with God that gets renewed. And on the basis of our repentance and redetermination to make a new start, we can go up step by step by step. So we can see in the past the covenant was, a long, long time ago, if we go back to Jesus' time, the Last Supper, Jesus made a covenant with his disciples to do with, this is bread, this is my body, and this is my wine, drink this wine, this is my blood. And this is the covenant, remember me. And through that then, when Christians do that every Sunday, then basically God can be with them. And then God can say to Satan, in a sense, well, these are my people. Look, they're doing this, they really believe in me, they really believe in Jesus, and they want to live a good life. And as long as they do the right things, then I have a claim on them. So God could work with Christian people that way. If you go back, back in history, you can see that actually this covenant was established at the Passover. In fact, Jesus gave the bread and wine at the feast of the Passover, the day before he was arrested. And the Passover was to do when the Israelites left Egypt, isn't it? Yeah? And what happened at that time? Do you remember? Can someone tell me quickly? Apart from William? Yeah. They cut a lamb, didn't they? They had made a feast, but using the blood of the lamb, they put it on the door. And if they did that, then the angel of death would pass over their house, and they would, be able to go out with Moses into the desert and go to Canaan. That was the idea, yeah? So basically, through that, God protected them. How does that work? Well, very simply, it's just a very simple thing that God could say to the evil spirit world and Satan, look, these people did that. They put the blood on the door. So who do they believe, me or you? Obviously, they believe me, because that's what they did. And so Satan will say, yeah, okay, yeah, sure. And they did. So it was like a sign or an indication of where they stood in terms of their faith in God or not. And if you go, even now, the Jewish people, they eat, at the feast of the Passover, they eat unleavened bread, actually, which is kind of reflected in also what Jesus was saying with bread and wine. If you go back again, there's an even deeper covenant with Abraham, right, in Genesis 17, where every male had to be circumcised. And it was a sign of the covenant between me and you, God said to Abraham. And that's to do with cutting of the foreskin, which is to do with the fall, basically, a sexual relationship. And you're kind of paying indemnity, making some offering at that time, basically, to symbolically separate from Satan. Yeah. So this covenant is very deep. It's not an arbitrary thing that Father invented. He didn't sort of think one day, let's have some bit of wine, quite good, and we'll do this. No, it's like it's rooted in history, and it's basically, if we take it very seriously, then we can say that we're part of this first resurrection, that God can really work with us, and we can be part of God's people. Yeah. So we're thinking about blessing. We're thinking about making a new start. We're thinking about our promise with God at the blessing. Yeah, and we're thinking about this covenant. So if we look in Romans, talks about the Messiah coming down and cutting down the wild olive trees and engrafting them with the true olive tree. You know this from those of Sunday services, probably, I'm sure. It's quite a well-known quote because it comes in the principle. And what it means is that we can also regain the same state of heart and love that would exist before the fall. If we really work on following God's words and living a godly lifestyle. You don't receive salvation or rebirth from a religion just by believing in it, right? You don't. Okay, you actually need to change. It's no good believing in it and then not doing anything about it. You don't change, because we need to change. We need to purify ourselves. We need to undo things within ourselves that are connected to the fall and cut off from them. We receive salvation through the blessing by actually attending the Messiah. So this is a very subtle point, actually, about attending the Messiah. So I want to read you something. I don't know if I can read it without breaking up about it, but I'll try. But it's to do with attendance, okay? And try and catch what I'm trying to say here about attendance, because this is a really key point. So, do you know who that is? Probably you don't. Yeah, it's my son, Samuel, and my dad, actually, in 2005, a couple of years before he passed away. And this is what I wrote about my dad at one point. I went to see my dad, and the next day he had his final stroke and died. So this is what I wrote, actually, about that time. My dad has a dribbly nose. My dad had a dribbly nose. The drip, unnoticed, slowly, stealthily elongated. It glinted glutinously, wobbling and stretching towards his lap. "Dad," I said, leaning forwards over the small table, touching his arm, "your nose is dribbling." "What, dear?" "Your nose, Dad. It's dribbling again." "Really? Oh, blast." He fumbled for a tissue, one skinny hand in his pocket. "It's my allergy, you know. I'm so sorry. I hope I'm not embarrassing you, am I?" "No, Dad, it's okay." The people around us carried on eating, unaware of the dribbly drama. The tissue caught the offending drip in time. Dad picked up his fork again and, peering at the plate, stabbed randomly in the general direction of the food. The fork caught a piece of fish pie. As he lifted it upwards, the fish fell off onto the plate. He put the empty fork he put the empty fork into his mouth. He looked in my direction. I can't see. I know, Dad. Here, let me help you. I leant over and took the fork off him. I'll put some fish on it, and when you're ready, just lift it up. I'll replenish it again for you, okay? It's the darn light. I used to sit by the window, and I could see, and I could at least see the plate. It must be the weather. Is it cloudy outside? You know it's very difficult for me now. I'm not being a pain, am I? I'm sure I'm a bother for you. I don't want to be a burden, you know. The picture. I gazed through the restaurant window out over the glinting, twinkling sea. No, Dad, the weather's fine. It's a bit sunny at the moment, and no, you're not a bother. If you were, I wouldn't be here, would I? I care about you, Dad. You know that, don't you? Yes, dear boy. I'm very grateful. Don't let me make you think otherwise. But, you know, my eyesight is gone, and it makes life very difficult. Yes, Dad, I know. 6 dribbles later, we walked slowly and carefully, arm in arm, down the steps outside the restaurant, leaving behind a half-empty plate and a messy tablecloth. The next day, my dad had his final stroke. So, that's what attendance is. You understand? Right? It's not bowing. It's not, do you know what I mean? Like externally, it's not bowing. It's not saying the right things. It's not doing the right thing. You know, it's not any of those things. It's actually, it's very deeply to do with heart. Yeah? It's to do with heart. You know, so actually, my relationship with my dad is very interesting in a way because I wasn't his son, and I lived with him all my life, so I thought he was my dad for a long time. And then later I found out he wasn't, and he was very strong and angry man, actually many times, and I didn't have a relationship with him at all until after my mother died, and I started to get to know him after he started to go blind and he had these strokes and he became very ill, actually. But through this attending my father these times, I built a very deep feeling for him, actually. A very deep feeling, because it was a very simple, artistic kind of relationship that I had with him, yeah? So finally, of course, when he died, I felt completely at a loss, actually. I felt alone and a loss. Like he was the last of his generation in all our family to be alive, and you know, he died when he was 95. So after he died, I suddenly realized what he was really worth to me. Do you understand? I understood who he really was because of my artistic connection with him. Yeah, I could understand, yeah, he was a great diplomat, and he used to travel and do all this and that, and, you know, all kinds of things. But also he is a man of tremendous values and standards. He always kept his word. He was a very honest person, basically, and very reliable. You could rely on him, you know, absolutely. You know, and he would never break a law of any kind. You know, he was that kind of person. Very conscientious, yeah. And but it was only later I realized, and it was only when I had this kind of relationship with him, through having to serve him and connect with him, that I could understand these good points about him and this aspect about him. And when he died, I felt really brokenhearted and really sorry for him, actually, because he had such a tough time when he was older, because he was, you know, so ill in many ways. And when Father died, I felt the same thing. I had the same experience, actually, where I caught quite a few stories of how he was, and I could see, you know, from the various emails and this and that, and some testimonies about him that I read in Today's World and other places, you know, what kind of things he went through. And of course, I was very privileged to be able to see him for 12 years, you know, quite a few times a year, and to really catch his real heart about things, you know. And I wanted to show you a picture, which I haven't got, unfortunately, in a digital form, but it's a picture I've got of him when he was in his, 50s. And he's sitting down and he's deeply thinking about something. And he's looking really, really, seriously thinking about something. And Mother's leaning over to him, and she's saying something to him. She's got hold of his arm, and she's saying something, you know. And that really catches my understanding of who Father is, because he worked so hard, you know, his whole life to put into practice what he believed in. And he really wanted us to understand what it was. And he really wanted us to practice it also. And especially he wanted his children to practice it. Yeah? And, how difficult it must have been for him when, his children couldn't understand. His own children couldn't understand what he was doing. And not only that, but he was betrayed many, many times, actually, by people around him. And finally, he literally worked himself to death, basically, to get to a point where he could say, I am blameless. I have done everything I can to make this thing work. To my last breath, I am going to do this. And that's what he did, basically. He knew he was ill, and he wasn't going to rest. He had to just continue to show this absolute determination. So in a sense, he crucified himself, we can say, really. Because I remember many times he was so exhausted, in our meetings, and yet he still pushed himself to carry on because he wanted to inspire us. He wanted to educate us. He wanted us to understand, what he was doing and who he was and, what was important about what he was saying, yeah? So, in a way, to really understand that, we have to attend Father through heart, yeah? We have to try and catch this aspect, of who Father really is. And then, actually, we can start to understand a little bit more maybe like who God is. Because God is the same, God is infinitely, maybe even more in a certain way. Because God has gone through all of history trying to, do the thing that can really bring his own children back. He's desperately trying to find his children, yeah. It's so difficult to catch that. And I think that the trouble is with us is that it takes a long time because we need to have a deep heart. And it takes many years to sort of have our own children and go through all kinds of things, ups and downs. And, finally we can think, oh yeah, now I think I can understand, It's like, often people say you never really understand your parents until you have your own children. It's really true, right? So we will never understand Father, until we have our own children, until we walk in the footsteps of Father. If we try to do a little bit of what Father did, we can start to understand who Father was really, and catch who he really was. Yeah. So, attending true parents is a matter of heart. Yeah. Attending God is a matter of heart. How deep is our heart? What do we really feel about true parents? Really, what do we really feel about God? How much do we sense about God? And these, of course, these points are determined very simply, actually, by the control that we have over ourselves and our purity. Father's always talking about mind-body unity and keeping pure. And we've heard it so many times, it just doesn't mean a lot in the end to us. But I tell you, it's absolutely to do with that. If you can control yourself properly and keep pure, you will feel God's Spirit in the heart very deeply, for days and days and days on end. Yeah. And you will start to have a deep connection with God and feel, what God is trying to do. And you'll sort of feel your part in all of that as well. And it's all different. It doesn't mean we all have to become church leaders or something. No. We all have very different roles to play, and we're all part of some big plan, right? So, you'll catch whatever your calling is. So here's a great picture here. This is such a cute picture, actually. I don't know if you can really see. But father and mother are just like little kids, they're so young, Just father's, 41 there, and mother's even younger. Such a young girl, really. And these are all our elder members now, just a bunch of young people, so cute. And, aren't they? They are really. If you look at that picture, I don't know where you can find it, but it's really cute, actually. So nice. And but actually, Father made a very amazing speech at that time, a very prophetic speech, which I want to leave you with this half session of my talk. So I just read it out, and you can sort of try and follow it as well, yeah? But it's really important for our circumstances today. So this is part of the speech. God warned humankind that there would be 7 years of great chaos in the last days. During this time of great difficulty, the faithful will be faced with circumstances in which the bonds between human beings will be severed completely, and they will be unable to trust anything. It will be a time when you will not be able to insist that you are following your course of life based on your conscience, no matter how much you have lived faithfully according to your conscience. It will be a time when you cannot insist that the course of your life is based on faith or some ideology. Anybody who embraces God's will and is awake will feel pain whenever he beholds what is around him. When such a time comes, that will be within the 7 years of great chaos in the last days. That will be a time when hope is shaken. That will be a time when the center of the faith that we believe in is shaken. That will be the time when leaders who had followed in faith will waver. Everything will be shaken. It will be a time when everything, ideologies, religion, conscience, and the parental heart will be shaken. That is why do not be sorrowful if you see the church sway. Do not be sorrowful if you see an ideology create disturbance. Do not be sorrowful if you see a sovereign collapse. Do not be sorrowful if you see your parents change. Do not be sorrowful if you see your brothers change and fall away. Even if everything in the world that you have relied on and trusted should sway, your hearts should be composed. You must know that God is unswayed, and even at this very minute he is coming to you. You must understand that he gives us pain because it is part of a great promise to connect us with that day, which he treasures, and with the pain that he has gone through. Therefore, do not be discouraged if you see that the path ahead is blocked. Do not lose heart if you see your nation falling into disorder. God is not dead. Do not lose hope, even if the world is in uproar. God is not dead. He will surely come to us. Even if everything is in chaos, do not waver in your single-mindedness towards heaven. Your heart of depending on heaven and looking toward heaven with hope must never change. Even if God should place you in a painful position to change that heart, you must remain fervent and be able to call upon the Father in such circumstances. No matter what kind of situation you find yourself in, you must make effort to hold on to God's heart as a lifeline and climb up from that position. So, what is this promise? Father mentions this promise that God made. So what is the covenant between us and God? So that's what I want to focus on next in my next half. Okay, thank you.
Very much, Tim. So that's now we're at 25, almost 25 past 4. So we'll take a 10-minute break.